over to talk. Thanks, Casey. Wendy had the book club over to talk about Maria and Ruthie's book, and it was one of the best nights I've had talking about a book. There's nothing like talking with the authors, and it incorporates so much wonderful Pittsburgh history, as I'm sure you've all found out.
Can't
Um,
hear. I can't
so
hear.
I think you're going to have to turn your volume up, Judith. Is there a volume button at the bottom of your screen? Looks like a megaphone, and maybe you can increase the volume on your speakers. I'm going to continue on because we are recording this. So, at a minimum, Judith, you can look at the recording online on YouTube if you go to PFWPA's website. So, anyway, we had a wonderful night talking about this book, and I've been all over Maria ever since to do a few more book clubs. And I'm so grateful. You can tell that Maria has some background with nonprofits because she understands the importance of funding. And, she's not charging us for this presentation. And it's so nice to have a topic that is different than Parkinson's disease, right? Every once in a while, you need to get away from it. So it is my pleasure to introduce Maria Palmer, who is a co-author of On the Rocks. She is Joe Costanzo's daughter. And her co-author, Ruthie Robbins, is absolutely tremendous and happens to have been Maria's AP English teacher in high school. Ruthie is a professor now in upstate New York, right, Ruthie?
Oh, I'm,
And
I'm teaching, yes.
oh, okay, yes. Um, so we are so excited to have them both, and I will shut up and turn it over to them.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Maria C. Palmer, and I'm joined today by my co-author, Ruthie Robbins. And we are so glad that you are here. This is so much fun. As Christine had mentioned, we met over October, and we had just such a lovely time chatting as ladies, as I'm sure we're going to have tonight as well. And it's just been my pleasure for her to bring me into the fold of the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. I had shared with Lauren and Casey and also Christine. I have a friend whose mother is really having a challenging time with Parkinson's disease. And she made the effort to come to our opening book signing at Mancini's Bread Company in the Rocks, or on the Rocks, on our opening night. And she has a lot of involuntary motor challenges, and to see the effort that she needed to make to get down to Mancini's Bread to come to the signing, I was so touched and so blown away. And so whenever Christine had approached us about doing something like this, I didn't hesitate for 1 second, because I wanted to make sure that this book and this story is accessible to all, and that everybody has a chance to have a little fun and to have a little chat, and to do it sometimes in the comfort of your own home. So it is wonderful for us to be here with you. I'll just tell you a little bit of my nonprofit background, since Christine had mentioned it, and then I'm going to let Ruthie introduce herself too, and then we can dive into giving you a little bit of the behind the scenes of how On the Rocks got started. And then we really want to just open it up to audience questions and discussion. So a little bit about my nonprofit work. I do work as a grant writer for a nonprofit here in northern New Jersey called St. Paul's Community Development Corporation. And what we do is we bring programs and services to people who need the most, mostly with basic needs. So we do things like food pantries and bringing services and programs and also medical care into the school system. We have a school system that goes K through 5 and then one that's 6 through 8. And we have permanent housing for women, a men's shelter that kind of helps get men back on their feet. I just did a holiday gift program for about 250 kids all throughout Patterson and Passaic County. So also nonprofit life is my sweet spot too. So it's great to be here with another wonderful nonprofit. So Ruthie, why don't you introduce yourself too, and then we can kind of start talking a little bit about how we got this book together, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
Okay. My name's Ruthie Robbins. Most Pittsburghers know me as Ruthie Dines because that was my name when I was a teacher and organist in Pittsburgh. I still keep a small apartment in Pittsburgh, but I'm located mainly in Buffalo, New York now. So I grew up on Dorman Street, which is the side of the Primadonna. And I loved growing up in West Park. And I went to St. Francis de Sales Catholic School. And then for high school, I moved up the hill, like they say people did in the book, moved up the hill to Kennedy Township. I taught at Montour High School for 35 years. And I was an organist at St. Malachy's and then St. Francis de Sales and then Mother of Sorrows, the merger, those of you who are familiar with McKees Rocks and St. Mary's. And then finally, after those churches merged, it was like 2 40-hour-a-week jobs. So I had to go, I left for the parish in West End. But I was organist since I was 15 for 44 years. My heart is all in Pittsburgh. So even though, and Buffalo is beautiful, it's not like it sounds ugly, but it's easier than Pittsburgh because there are no hills. We don't even have 2-hour delays here. So people always ask about the snow, except for last Christmas. No, it's easier to manage here. But I grew up with so many of the people who are in the book. They're around my age, and some I went to school with. One's even a distant relative. And so when that restaurant first opened, my sister and I saw it, and we just had to try it. And I think there were maybe 2 other people in there that night, and we got to meet Joe and talk to him. And we kept going there regularly, and I kept recommending it. And then the restaurant picked up. And then a few years later, Maria was in my 7th grade English class in junior high. And then we kept in touch, and I saw her at the restaurant, saw the family constantly. My ex-husband was a track coach, and her sister was a track star. And then Maria wound up in my class again in high school. And we never lost touch.
Thank you, Ruthie. That was really beautiful. So before we kind of dive into audience questions, I just want to tell you a little bit more of the behind the scenes and how On the Rocks got started, because that tends to be a question that most people do have. But also I want to tell you too that we will answer any and all questions. So if you have one and you're a little bit shy and you think, oh, I don't want to ask her about this because it might be a sensitive topic, there's a reason why it took 17 years to write this book. Nothing is off the plate. So please, it makes for a great discussion. Ask whatever you want. Everybody will get a chance. And I know that I think Christine and Casey and Lauren are going to be monitoring the chat to help with guiding our discussion, because as my husband says, I can talk forever, but it's more fun if I talk about the things that you want to hear about. So,
may I interject for 1 second? We have a relatively small group here today. So if you would prefer to unmute and ask your question, feel free to do that, or you can put it in the chat. Okay?
That's perfect. That's perfect. That's even better. So let me tell you a little bit about how the concept of On the Rocks happened, because at first, the intention was really never a book. It was really a family history project. And for those of you who know my dad or have been to the restaurant, you know that that restaurant was really his baby. It's like his third son that he never had. He loved that restaurant. He spent so much time at that restaurant, and he loved each and every single person that came into that restaurant too. So for him, about 17 years ago, whenever the restaurant went away, and obviously I know everybody's kind of read the book, and he, kind of lost that piece of him, it really took him to a different place. And I don't think that men a lot of times admit that they're sad or depressed like us women do. I think we're much more attached to our emotions in a very healthy way. But for him, I could tell that he was really down about the fact that something that had meant so much to him for so long was now no more. And so I thought, because I'm a writer by trade, I had shared earlier that I'm a grant writer for a nonprofit here in northern New Jersey. I thought one way that I could get him back to being who he wanted to be was to reminisce about the past, right? We always have these wonderful, fond memories about the happiest days and the happiest times. So I would ask him things on the phone like, Dad, tell me about a time that you had the best night of your life at the restaurant, or tell me about a time that a really cool, unexpected person came in, or tell me about a time that something really crazy happened, or was there ever a fight at the restaurant? And then I had one of these old school tape decks that you could record whenever I was in college. You could record professors, and then I would transcribe all of my notes. So I would get him to a point where he would start telling stories, and then I would hit the play and the record button, and I would just let him go. And that's really how this project started. And after we were off the phone, I would just transcribe it and try to put it into a story. But I really wasn't having any luck, and I took it as far as I could take it. And I thought, since I was a part of the story too, I thought maybe I should put in my own perspective. So for a little while, I was writing my thoughts on certain things and trying to do one chapter in my voice, one chapter in his voice, but I was really struggling. And as Ruthie had mentioned, we never lost touch. We have so many 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's not even funny. From just her growing up in the Rocks to being a customer to being my teacher, not just once, but several times, starting in middle school all the way through high school, to being very close friends with her oldest son, and my sister being very close friends with her middle son. There's a lot of history there. And so whenever she had known that I was working on this project, she asked to see a couple of the pieces of the project, and then I will let her explain kind of how she took it to the writing group, and then how we started to partner. So I'm going to end there and let Ruthie take over.
Okay, so Maria's first version really was a work of art, and it had a lot of what's in the book now, but she didn't seem to be the right voice to me. I'm an English teacher, and I have written other books, but I've had a lot of small things published. I had a big interdisciplinary unit for Kennywood Park. That was the most fun thing in the late 90s. But I didn't get around to publishing my own books yet because I was so busy teaching all the time. So I liked it, but it seemed to me that at the beginning of the story, Maria was just a baby. And she was telling it, she wasn't telling it firsthand. And some parts were stronger, some others, it seemed like the females would love her voice and her perspective, but yet this should be a story for everybody. And I just felt the restaurant story would be strengthened by firsthand. So at first I thought the only way to do it was that all-knowing narrator that omniscient third person that knows everybody's thoughts and all that stuff. So we work together constantly. We take a chapter or even just an anecdote at a time. We did that for a good while. I belong to a writers group in South Buffalo. And I was first invited by one of my students' mothers who had quit the police force to write. And since that day, she hadn't published anything. That was 2016. Now she's on her 8th book as a mystery writer. Her name's Lisa Redmond. So if you like mysteries, they're very accessible, quick reads. She's been a great mentor to me. But we're trying the third person, and it just felt a little stiff. I just didn't like it. So I went many times back with pieces to the writers group, and then Lisa Redmond said, why don't you write in Joe's voice? Try writing in Joe's voice. I thought, wow, that is really different. But it was fun. So on the way home, I would call Maria and tell her what the writers said. And we started it, and it just became, it's like a burden was lifted. He's such, those of you who knew him, know him now, he's just such a larger than life character. And he has his phrases and the way he says things, and Maria's memories were good. And so we decided to write it in Joe's voice. And that changed everything. So we did that for a long time. And then Joe had his first kidney transplant. And, you know, he was excited about the book, but not that heavily involved in it. But when that transplant began to fail, well, Maria, you could take it from there, how you used the book to give him hope and how he became more involved.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it was always a joke growing up. He would always say, somebody should write a book about my life, or somebody should do a movie about my life because it's that crazy. But whenever his health really started to fail, so he is a 2-time kidney transplant recipient. His first kidney transplant came in September of 2019. It was very hopeful for about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and then everything started to go wrong. And unfortunately, he spent 50 days in the hospital, and just bad news after bad news. We learned first that he had contracted an infection in the hospital, which was kind of hard to control. And especially whenever you have a transplant, you're on immunotherapy drugs, which really makes your immunity very low and your ability to fight things not so good. And then on top of that infection, he got a second infection, and then he actually got sepsis, which is very, very, very bad. And we didn't really know at the time what was going to happen. And it was such a blow because whenever you are a transplant patient who finally gets a kidney, that's your end goal. That's what you're hoping and aiming for. And whenever that does not go to plan, there's not like a plan B. So, and you can't just get another kidney overnight either. So he ended up going back on dialysis and did not do as well on dialysis the second time around. And then we received another miracle in September of 2020, right at the height of the pandemic. He got his second transplant. And during that transplant and throughout that whole year, as Ruthie had said, he became much more invested in the book because this was something that he wanted to see to fruition. So he would constantly ask what's going on, what was our progress, and we would ask him to fact check things and ask him about more details about a particular story because, first of all, we needed to know. And second of all, we thought that that could help him take his mind off of some of the medical things that he was facing at that time. And in September of 2020, he received his second transplant. And unfortunately, whenever they went to start his kidney, whatever drug they used to start your kidney, he was allergic to it. But he didn't react to it the first time around, because a lot of times with allergies, it's not the first time something's introduced to your body, it's the second time because your body recognizes it. And they didn't know what happened. They thought that he potentially had either a stroke or a massive heart attack on the operating table. And of course, that was during the height of the pandemic. So the only person that was able to be live with him was my mom. So we were hearing all of this via the phone, and she didn't really have a very great audio situation with her phone. So it was almost every other word. Just hearing the doctor say things like, "This has never happened before. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if he's going to come out of it." So he was in a coma, a medically induced coma, for a whole week. And one of the things that we did, and I know this is going to sound crazy and wild, but we had at that point in the summer of 2020, Ruthie and I had pretty much finished our first copy of the manuscript, and we had beta readers that were reading it. But we put it in binder form, and we would take turns between my mom, my sister, and I, and we would go to the hospital and we would read him the book while he was unconscious. And we would like always hold his hand. And I think he was listening, even though he really wasn't there, because, certain parts would happen and then you would feel him squeeze your finger. And, slowly he kind of came back to himself. It was a very long process, but I really do believe that by having this book and this project to look forward to, it gave him a second chance at hope and a second chance at life. And it's been a beautiful thing for our family. And, I always said to people, even if this book never sold a copy, the fact that we've created all these memories together as a result of it, and this wonderful relationship that I have with Ruthie, and having the opportunity to be here with all of you tonight, that's worth it for me. That is so well worth it for me, and just so awesome. So thank you all. I'm going to pause here because I could talk all night, but we want to hear from you. So if you would like to unmute and ask a question, we would love that. Or if you want to get more information on a particular scene, or if you want to know about a person, people seem to always be very inquisitive about Big Sexy in the book. So,
Right. We really haven't had the chance to hear from readers. I'm excited to hear, like, what did you like, or what did you not like? We did see one lady really mad at her dad on her book signing. That was very cute. But we really haven't heard from readers. So I'd love to hear. And we could talk forever. We could talk about the process of getting the book published. That's another interesting story. But what would you like to hear?
Yeah. Not all at once.
I'll start folks off.
Okay.
Maria, I can't help but think about your mom the whole time I'm reading this book. Like, how she should be up for sainthood. How did she get through this?
That is the question of the hour. So, for those of you who have not met or come in contact with my mom is one of those people that is just an unsung hero and just a team player to the nth degree. But she has no idea that she is the way that she is. And so, one of the stories that Ruthie was just relaying was we were all three going to be, and I'll come back a little bit more to my mom's perspective on things, but we were all three going to be at a book signing at the Settlers Ridge Barnes and Noble. And I was advertising this like crazy, the On the Rocks trifecta. Joe will be there, and Ruthie will be there, and I will be there, and it's going to be great. This one woman wrote me an email, and she said to me, "I'm so glad that you guys will all be here, but I'm not coming to see any of the three of you." She said, "My interest in who I'm coming for is I am coming for Donna." I love Donna. I loved her in the restaurant. And I love her character. And I just think that she is the coolest. So I relayed that to my mom and I said, Mom, they're coming for you. They don't want to talk to us. They want to talk to you. Could you come to this book signing? And my mom, just the practical, sweet human being that she is, she just was very confused why people would want to see her. And then she said, Well, I do have to make some pasta today. I have a little sewing to do. I'm not sure that I can make it there until 3 o'clock. So whoever would like to see me, I'll try to be there by 3 o'clock. And then she was late because that is my mom's one tragic flaw is that she is late to everything. So we always tell her at least a half an hour to an hour before she needs to be there. But she strolled in late, and this woman was there on time. We said 3 o'clock, and she's talking to my dad because she was a customer too. And she said, I didn't come to see you. I came for Donna. What happened? She told me that Donna was going to be here. So, we said, oh, she's coming. She's coming. She was going to be late and running behind. But then she started to just recall all of her memories of my mom and my dad and just how she felt about my dad, especially after he got in trouble. And it was just the funniest conversation I think I've ever had in a long time. Just so, so wonderful. But back to my mom, I think that she grew up in a family of 6 children. She grew up in Hazelwood in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with both of her parents. And I think that that pretty much defines when you're growing up with 6 children in 1 bathroom, and 4 of those children are females, and the 4 girls shared the bedroom that didn't even have a closet. It was so small and tiny. And I think that having those kind of early struggles in your life really sets you up for being able to have complete and utter resiliency. And, my mom has faced a lot of struggles during her life. And I think with my dad is a very gregarious, larger than life human being, enough to write a book on, obviously, because there is one. But I think behind every person who's like that, you need a person that's just so much more grounded and much more of a team player. And that is my mom. And she's actually going to be speaking for anybody that's interested in January. If you are close to McKees Rock, she's going to be speaking at the McKees Rocks Historical Society meeting. And let me see what it's I think it's the third Tuesday of the month. I'll give you guys the date just so you know. January 16th, I believe it is, that third Tuesday of the month. She'll be at the McKees Rocks Historical Society, and she's going to be telling her side of the story because everybody wants to hear from Donna, and she's a person that doesn't really do a whole lot of media, and she's so humble that she doesn't understand the beauty of why she might be canonized one day. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. Ruthie, what am I missing? Fill in for me.
Oh, nothing. She's just a salt of the earth person. She's fabulous.
Wasn't there one story where she took your dad down the steps in the restaurant and set him straight?
More than once, yes.
There's a funny story that actually didn't make the book. And it's cute. So, and there were many stories. The book at one point was, I think, 450 pages. So there's so many stories, so many characters, but we had to really truncate things to make it more easily accessible for the readers because you could really just get lost in all of this. But one really cute story is one time they were having a pretty heated argument at the house, and my dad said to her, there are so many women who would give anything to be in your shoes. And so she was at the top of the steps by her bedroom, close to her closet, and he was standing. We had, balcony. that looked out into this atrium, and he was standing at the atrium by the front door. And she went in and got her shoes, and she just started throwing them at him like one after another. And I think then he got the point and he stopped talking anymore. But that's just one example of their yin and yang. And you know, they definitely don't always see eye to eye on everything, but there's a reason why she gets as mad as she does at times. And both my sister and I always say, you know, Dad, we love you with our whole hearts, but you are a lot. You are a lot.
Yeah, and Joe was thoughtful about it. You know, we talked constantly, just fact checking, making sure the things we're writing about were okay with him. And the bottom line was he would wonder, is his vision was so strong, does he have to ignore all the voices, including Donna's, or is Donna's the voice of reason that he needs to listen to? And he had a hard time within himself figuring that out.
Good point. Excellent question.
Well, folks, excuse me. I have to leave. I have another commitment. Maria, Ruthie, thank you for writing about the rocks.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And Maria, your dad, everywhere I go, everyone wants to hear about the rocks. And it's just, it was a great place. Thanks again. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you so much for coming. It's really wonderful to see you, and my dad loves you and sends all of his love to you. Who would like to go next? I promise we are not as scary as we look. Everybody has survived who has asked a question, including Christine.
I have a question. What does your sister think about the book and the story? I haven't heard about your sister.
Yeah, sure. So my sister is such a wonderful, selfless human being and person. She actually is in Pittsburgh. She lives about 3 minutes away from my parents in the Canonsburg area, and she's a hairdresser at the Robinson Mall. She owns Sharp Hair Boutique, so if anybody ever needs to get their hair done, she has the same altruistic spirit as my dad. She's always doing just wonderful things for other people. She goes and makes house visits and, you know, helps people to kind of keep their hygiene up if they can't get out of their house. She's always donating to every single charity possible. Whenever I told her that I was going to write this book, she was elated. And she, I would say, has been, other than, you know, obviously our On the Rocks inner circle, she probably has been one of the champions for this book. She just has opened up her heart and just been so receptive, constantly talking it up on social media, telling friends about it. She has a social media person that works for her as her hairdressing business, and she hired that person for our wonderful kickoff at the Heinz History Center, which was just fantastic. And, you know, never asked me to pay a dime for it, and just is really such a wonderful human being, and it is so supportive and so excited about the book. I can't, there's nothing negative to say, only positive things. And she is loving it and just is so happy to see my dad happy about this. And I think that that's what's so wonderful.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Casey.
You're welcome.
I have a question. I know
Sure.
you're talking about how long the book almost was, but 400 some pages. What, you know, was there a story that you really wish you could have included, or after it was published, you're like, oh man, I wish I had added that on, or, you know, maybe taken that out? Or did you have any feelings of wishing you could edit after it was already published?
Yeah, Ruthie, why don't you start first, and then I'll give my perspective too on that.
Oh, some of the best stories. had to be cut because,
Oh.
well, we had to disguise some things, but when you publish a nonfiction, it has to be nonfiction. You can't add 3 stories that you think would fit the restaurant industry or a story from another restaurant. No, but we just would have to be delicate about it and maybe disguise things just enough or use a different name, that kind of thing. And so when we first got things back from the publisher, they said, there's 10 comments. I thought, oh, good, 2 hours. No, the comments were like, take this storyline out, because even though it may be true, the people are dead, the people who are surviving may not believe it, you have no proof. They were just so worried about any kind of libel, or even not even legal, but just other people being affected adversely who may not want some of the best stories in there. So if you say to us, take this out, and that storyline went through 8 chapters, oh, it's just, and then that changes where a chapter ends. You try to keep it with some suspense. So those were the kinds of comments. And that was but they also had a timeline, and it was put out by Ingram. I think that's the largest distributor in the world. So if you don't meet their timeline, get in the back of the line. They don't care at all. And I just had a toe off last year, and I couldn't step for 2 weeks. I couldn't put my foot on the floor. And that's when all this came in. And I went 19 days, and Maria too had ungodly hours with her family. In 19 days, I had no more than 3 hours sleep, because you had to meet that deadline, or we wouldn't have had the books for the History Center event. And they were real writing challenges under pressure, and that reshaped the whole book. And so that was very difficult. But there were some fights, there were some romances, there were some really funny. But then sometimes the publisher was worried, even though you've hidden this story has to be one for the ages, and people may recognize or bring out on social media, I know who that was. So a lot got cut that we didn't want to have cut. We also hope so much. We feel like this is a story that could lend itself to a TV series in the funny way, like Cheers, with the real employees. We don't have to make up one character. Every employee was such a character. Use the real employees, but it also had the drama of This Is Us. And we feel like it would be such a good TV series. So that's our hope and prayer. And then the 100 stories that were on the cutting room floor could come back in. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that too. An interesting comp to our book is Your Table is Served. And I think what makes our story very different from the story that Michael, I think his name is Michael Cecchio, and his other last name begins with an A, but he tells his story. He was a maitre d' in New York City, and he tells his first perspective restaurant story. But one of the things that he does is he throws a lot of people under the bus. So he says a lot of really not nice things about celebrities that would come into the restaurant that he was working for. And, knowing the spirit of my dad, if you know my dad, that's just not who he is. He's somebody that uplifts people. He's not somebody that drags people down to the nth degree. And so we really thought carefully, and also my dad too, about how these potentially really wonderful stories may impact somebody, and not even how they may impact somebody in the moment that they're read, but how they could potentially impact somebody else down the line. So one of the stories, which I won't give too many details about, there was a server that used to work for us whenever she was a teenager, and she kind of made some poor life decisions as a teenager, but we all do. And she has just been very successful as an adult, and works in a capacity that's like a community kind of capacity. And, she had asked me, I saw her, we had coffee together, and she said, I don't understand why my character wasn't in the book. And I said to her, this is the reason why we did not want to put your character in the book. We know that you would be fine with it, but what happens if the people that you work for or work with read about something that happened 20 some years ago, and now they may have a judgment on you, or they may see you differently. And we never would want to do something like that. And I know that Ruthie is always like this too, and certainly my dad and myself. I never want somebody to say, On the Rocks ruined my life or my family's reputation, or, used something that happened to me 20 years ago as like a get rich scheme. No, we're not doing that. That's just not our style. That's not something that we wanted to be a part of. So we chose very carefully. And, also the publisher had their opinions on certain things too. But, every story in the book, I would say, is done in a way where the people that are involved are cast in the most positive light, even if they're not great players. Like, Big Sexy is not a nice human, but everybody who has read the book seems to have this really endearing thought about him. And that to me is really cool as writers, that we could bring out something positive in somebody that is not always a positive person or influence on society. So I think that was an important consideration too, whenever we decided what to leave and what to take out. And again, we have all of these little stories, so maybe one day you'll see them on the screen manifest in other ways, but they definitely aren't lost. They're just not part of the book at this particular moment in time. But great question, Lauren. Anybody want to go next? I know that Christine had typed some questions in the chat too, but see if anybody, you can just unmute if you would like to.
I have a question.
Okay.
Sure.
First of all, I am not Linda. I'm not Donna Herbert. I'm Donna Murphy. The labels under my name are not correct. I was wondering, you were talking about some of the people that were in the book. Were there any negative issues after the book was published? That someone was upset about how they were mentioned?
Not one from my perspective and from my dad's perspective, and I'll let Ruthie weigh in. Not, believe it or not one person has been angry or said that, they were upset. That is really a lot of credit. Ruthie did a lot of back leg work, which she can talk a little bit about, just, making sure that the memories that we held were correct in how we held them. Because over time, things change. We remember things in different ways. And so I'll let Ruthie talk a little bit about that too. But from my knowledge, there's not one person that's upset, which is wonderful.
This isn't an upset, but there were so many iterations of the book. And then the publisher wanted it greatly shortened. So at different points, Joe told people they're in the book because they were. And then later, I thought I was in the book. And he said, I thought you were too. You are, because he had heard and read those versions. And we submitted them at the time. But then towards the end, everything starts tumbling. We have a hard time remembering what's in and what's out. Maybe we had something in there for 3 years, and then they cut it and we forgot it was cut. It gets so fast paced towards the publication date. So some people were upset about that. I made a lot of phone calls. I would even call the wife of the DJ he was kind of a shock jock, and he really brought in a lot of business, but I wanted to make sure it was okay with her that we put that in. So I made a lot of calls. I also want to say, if you're worried about your memories failing, we are all unreliable narrators. There is not a reliable narrator alive. I don't care if you're 12, you're an unreliable narrator. So my husband now was my high school sweetheart. Then we were both in other marriages for a long time and just married in 2017. And it's amazing that our memories, even of high school, are I'll have the best night and he doesn't remember it at all, and vice versa. And it's just, it was very hard to do the fact checking, but we did a lot of it. And we're lucky in a way that it was the pandemic, or this never would have gotten done. So both of us, you know, our workload slowed down and we stayed in the house, and that's what enabled us to do that. But yeah, thank God. I wonder too, is there anything, I mean, we tried so hard, but did we unintentionally say anything or upset anybody? But I think we would have heard by now. So thank God, nothing.
Yeah, knock on wood on that one. Great question, Donna. Thank you.
As you wrote the book, did you interview any of the people and continue to get their perspective? And how did you interview them?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, I would just call people whenever my dad would mention somebody in a story. I would call them and kind of get a little bit more perspective. And then as time went on and Ruthie was in the fold, she did a lot of fact checking with people and just kind of making sure that the memories and the players and the people were correct. And even just, you know, because because we were writing from my father's perspective, that's one person's perspective. So if he had a really negative interaction with that person, was it just a bad day that the person was having? Was that really the person's character? Was there something else to the story that we could not have heard from my dad as the narrator? So Ruthie asked a lot of those questions. I think it was nice to have that third person perspective, because I think if I called and asked some of those questions, I don't know that I would have gotten the same type of candid responses. But Ruthie, why don't you weigh in a little bit more to that too?
I did. I called so many people, and sometimes I had a connection because I grew up in the Rocks as well, but other times I didn't. And there's nobody who wasn't cooperative or willing to talk. It just was extremely time consuming, and good thing it was a pandemic. I have no children at home anymore. I was able to do the 18-hour a day thing, and Maria came close to it too with all she was juggling. But we talked to probably most of the people in the story who were still alive.
I wondered too, you know, if when you started the book, he was writing about his childhood and going to other stores, and the people were together and everybody worked together and on the street and the neighborhoods. And I can say it was like reading my childhood to me. I didn't grow up in McHugh's Rocks, but our family would go downtown to the stores.
Yes.
And it was just so many memories that brought back, even if you didn't live in McHugh's Rocks.
Good, that's what we hope. And I did live in McHugh's Rocks. Joe didn't. But the family would come occasionally. But my memories were so clear that I was able to name, that's the name of the chicken store. And that's what they did at Isley's. That was the name of the ice cream cone or whatever. So that was good that I could put names to the more vague memories that he had. But didn't we have the most wonderful downtown Pittsburgh?
Oh, absolutely. And then in the Strip District,
oh,
we would go down every Saturday with Sinceres, Pennsylvania macaroni.
Yes.
All the places that he mentioned where he did his shopping.
Right.
My food never turned out all that great, but
right. I try to tell my kids how wonderful it was in downtown Pittsburgh with the big 5 and 10s and the 3 department stores and all the little shoe stores and clothing stores. Oh, it was just, I mean, no mall can compare it to downtown Pittsburgh and the atmosphere, the change of seasons, you know, the outdoor shopping. I'm so blessed. Even when Macy's, that took over the Kaufman's building, when they closed, I thought, oh, if you had taken a 1-page ad and said, please shop downtown or we're going to have to close. You know, I think a lot of us would have stayed and shopped downtown. We didn't feel like it would all be over. And that's, I'm so glad that you got that feeling. And that's what I was hoping, because most small towns and neighborhoods did have that same feel. So thank you.
I just want to add to that too, because I know that Ruthie will be very humble about this, but that the scene of the rocks has really garnered so many sales and a lot of people talking, because people that maybe don't know about the story or have no clue about my dad, or maybe they're not really into food, they're buying the book because of that very chapter. They are moved by the memories that once were whenever they were growing up. And Ruthie, you just did a really beautiful job painting that picture of McKee's Rocks. And I think it's a way that people want to remember what was. And I think it's just so beautifully done. And I there's not one person that said something negative about it. So you just did such a great job. Such a great job on that chapter.
Thank you. My heart was there. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how hard it was to get this book published. Well, we went to the category of memoir, and we did not guess in a minute. We knew nothing about the industry. Our competitors were all of the celebrities and athletes and reality stars. So what I did know about the publishing industry is that a publisher will say, okay, next year we're going to budget for 18 mysteries or 2 cookbooks or whatever. They have a budget and they have a staff, and then they look for the best in the type of book that they want to publish. But we didn't realize we had so many kind rejections. But again and again, Joe wasn't a nationally recognized face. So if you're on that biography shelf, people are not likely to pull down a book about someone they don't know about. And we got hundreds of rejections. And it's not easy. You have, the book proposal is ours was 58 pages. They put you through so much. You have to tell comparable books, the prices, the number of pages, why yours can compete, who your readers might be. You had to include a certain number of written pages. It was just grueling. So to each, first it was hard to find an agent for that reason. And then once an agent, Maria met an agent who believed in her. After that, it was hard for the agent to find the publisher because of the competition. And if it weren't the pandemic, all of those people wouldn't have written their books. And so it wouldn't have been so tough. And it was very hard to get the book, and time consuming and expensive. So when we finally heard, Maria and I heard separately, she heard first, but we had the exact same reaction. We just cried hard. We just cried, both of us. And I didn't expect to do that. You think you'd be laughing or smiling. No, it was
Yes,
it was such a relief. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I had no idea, you don't know what you don't know. And so learning about this process, and just for numbers' sake, we sent out, whenever you approach agents, because agents are the first part of the process. So whenever you approach an agent, you're not paying them. They're taking you on for free. And we had sent, you have to send these query letters, which are 3-paragraph letters about what is the hook of your book. So what's the most exciting and enticing one line of your book that kind of summarizes it? Who are you? And why should you be writing the book? And we sent out 265 of these things, and 140 people didn't even have the courtesy to say thank you, but no thank you. They just completely ghosted us. And then a little over 100 people sent us a form letter. And this is after, as Ruthie said, we had a full manuscript that was 300 plus pages. We had a book proposal that was 58 pages and the query letter. And they just sent us a form letter. Thanks, but we're not interested. And then 17 people requested more information, and only one person, who happened to be the agent that we wanted most, ended up offering us representation, but that wasn't until I met her in February, and that wasn't until the following July. So publishing moves at a glacial pace for sure. And any book that gets out there into the world, just as a child is born into the world, it is somewhat of a miracle. So we count our blessings very much on this book, which has been awesome. I think Donna Herbert. Oh, perfect. Okay, Charlotte, go ahead.
Why is there a particular reason why you didn't consider to self-publish?
So as far it's not that we had anything against self-publishing at all, and there are certainly books that are self-published that do quite well. What happens whenever you have a manuscript is if you decide to self-publish, or if you decide to go down the self-publication route, you cannot then take that project to an agent and to a more traditional publisher. But if you decide to do it in the reverse, if you decide to try the agent route and the traditional publishing route, and for some reason you just get rejected time after time, then you could go into the self-publishing lane. So for us and for our thoughts is that we should just try to do the agent and the traditional route first. And then if we've exhausted all of those options, then we self-publish. I wasn't willing to just let this book collect dust on the shelf. I definitely wanted it out there. To be honest with you, if this publisher did not come through for us, we certainly probably would have had to end up self-publishing it, because, you know, this was a process that, as we had mentioned, we were done with the manuscript in the summer of 2020, and the book did not come out, did not get a contract until October of 2022. And then the book did not come out until August of 2023. So we were on the route to self-publication, but luckily got a different call to go with this particular publisher. But yeah, that's why
I'll say one thing though. One thing that appealed to me about having a publisher, I thought they did all the work. So wrong. I didn't know. We were the proofreaders for the typesetters. So we sent a clean manuscript. The editor said it's the cleanest manuscript she ever got. And I said, well, it should be. I'm a grammar teacher. And, you know, those are anywhere near my age. We went to grammar school. We diagrammed, we practiced. You know, grammar was a great big thing then. So my grammar is clean. But when it came back from whoever typesets the book, there were hundreds of mistakes. Hundreds. Even the first page said it was a work of fiction and any resemblance to characters is no, it's nonfiction. And there were so many mistakes. There were 2 extra letters in Joe's name on the first page. So that was really grueling. I thought you send it nice and clean. Okay, then they make sure that what comes out is what you sent. So when I was reading at the Heinz History Center, instead of George Washington, it says Roy Washington. And, you know, when you're in front of everybody, I read Roy and then saw Washington. It was too late. I don't think that we and our families proofread that thing to death. So I don't think we left it at Roy Washington. The mistakes were not just tiny things. There were tiny, but there were big ones too. And I also thought that the publisher just puts it out there and sells it for you. No. So, and then those 2 things, the reason I thought the publisher would be better, they're really not true. You are also the marketers of your book.
Yeah, and we had no idea just what that was going to entail either. You know, just like kids don't really come with a handbook, neither do books. It's been just a crazy trial and error. Let's do this. Let's try this. Let's go here. And some of the things that we do are fabulous and they work, and other things, it's just, okay, well, I guess we won't do that again. Also, we laugh about it.
It's uncomfortable for us to say, please write a review. because really, or people think we have books. I thought we were going to have books. I thought you get the book for maybe $5 or $10 and I'd be giving them to everybody for Christmas. No, we have to buy the books like everybody else. We can get them at a discount plus shipping, but it doesn't count as a book sale. And so sales are what makes Amazon or other people recommend your book when they say a lot of people are liking this, you know, and they recommend it to people who are browsing. So it's important. You want a good number of sales, but we're shy about that. We're shy about asking people for reviews or posting on Facebook, but you have to. If we don't, we know it'll just, you know, fade away.
Yeah. And I think I've gotten a little bit better about that because being in the nonprofit world, I won't even ask for a cup of water for myself. I could be thirsty in a desert, haven't drinking anything for at least a week, and I will just, you know, try to forage on my own. But to ask for somebody else that needs something, no problem. I'll get up and do it in a heartbeat. And so for me, the book has become its own little entity. So I have no problem now asking, or just, you know, whenever people say that they have really enjoyed the book, one small thing that you can do to really help us is to go on to Amazon and give us an honest review, even just a hearty number of stars, and just say great book in the headline. Because what it does is it helps us to play with some of the larger publishers and the larger players that have these really big budgets and have other people working for them. So that is one great way that you could help, or even just recommending the book to others and word of mouth. You know, that certainly helps too. Donna Herbert, I saw that you had unmuted at one point. I want to make sure we get your question in.
Yeah, I have to admit that I haven't read it yet. I bought the book and I'm meaning to read it, but I was waiting to hear from you guys. And I definitely agree with you. I think we should create a whole Pittsburgh movement, a Facebook groupie page for your book. Spread the word. And I think the idea of a TV show would be great. But again, I haven't read the book, and Donna sounds a lot like me. I'm always late, and I'm always it's not her story. But I wondered if your family had to review this book, because I don't know, involving families in a story about your dad. I don't know. Was there any family drama with that?
Oh, yeah. I'd love to talk about that.
But the other thing I wanted to mention too was I wanted to know if your dad was particular that he wanted to get certain parts in the way he wanted them. Like which sections was he really concerned with?
Yes, go ahead, Ruthie, you start and then I'll fill in.
Okay, so the first 80 copies or so of the manuscript we sent out, we thought the book was done. And then, but there were things I wanted Joe to say, but Joe was an Italian man of a certain generation. They were not vulnerable. They grin and bear it. They don't tell those kinds of things. So there were things I'd suggest to him, and I could tell he wasn't comfortable in the first edition. Oh, well, and the ending wasn't, I can't even remember. The ending just wasn't nearly as strong. Then he had the second kidney transplant, and he got stronger. And that's when the diabetes came into the story. At first he thought, that's not important. You know, no one wants to read about that. Yes, it's very important because so many people, I mean, my gosh, I just got out of the hospital. I was in the hospital a week. I thought I was going to die 2 Wednesdays ago. So yes, we have some serious, a lot of people have various diseases, but whatever the disease, it's life affecting for them and for their loved ones. So I had suggested the diabetes and he wasn't comfortable, but then he allowed us to put it in. And it's a dramatic part of the story and definitely a dramatic part of his life today because of his limitations from the advanced diabetes. And then surprisingly, Donna and Joe pretty much revised the end and just told the end of that story. And I don't want to give it away then if everybody hasn't read it, in such a vulnerable and honest way. And then I said, when Maria read me what her mother had written, I said, oh my goodness, now it's a book. But that's not a generation. When Joe talks about his own father, nope, not your business, kids. He went to work, he came home, and that's that. So the first edition didn't have nearly as much. And I see a change in Joe. He's willing to expose his vulnerabilities, and his focus is just on gratitude now. And it's beautiful. So, yes.
And I would agree. I think that's such an excellent question, Donna. So I think that that's part of the reason why it took 17 years to write it, is because at first I was very concerned about what other people might think. And especially, it's not like my family had been through just a little bit. We had been through a lot. We had been through a lot of really life-changing situations, and the federal prison time included. And something really interesting happened after my dad got out of prison. And I guess that this is maybe something that would be a coping mechanism, is that we stopped talking about it as a family. So it became the time that he went away. But we would never say where he went to. He was just gone. And that became really hard, because as the time frame got larger and larger, I think everybody distanced themselves from that bad memory more and more. So bringing that up to my dad was really hard. And at first, that piece was not going to be included in the story, because first of all, I didn't really want to revisit that, because it was a very painful time in our lives. But second of all, I thought that it would be very hard for my dad to revisit that. And I thought that he would kind of put the Italian men brakes on that and say, we're not going to talk about that. And that's something that happened in the past. We don't need to say that. People want to hear about all of the positive things that happened and how the restaurant kind of changed McKee's Rocks. And we do talk about all of those things too. But I think the fact that we talk about some of the harder things, it's really easy to talk about the good things about us, right? The things that make people gravitate towards us, the things that make us who we are, the ways that we give to one another, the ways that we give to our family and our friends, and what makes us whole. It's really hard to talk about the duality of a human and the things about us. I know, I have certain things about myself that I would rather other people not know, or if they do know, maybe they could forget, because they're not things that I'm proud about. But that's what makes us human. And I think one of the things that Ruthie had said, to kind of get him to look another way about it, is now everything is public record. So you can easily Google anybody's name, Google my name, Google your names, and there are going to be things that come up. And, that's something that comes up. That's a part of our history. That's a part of what happened to my dad. But it doesn't tell you the why behind why it happened. And so the power of this story is it gave him and it gave our family an avenue to tell people the full story, not denying that something happened, because something did happen, but why did that happen? So we took back our own pen and kind of wrote our own narrative around that. And I think that people can appreciate that. And what I've heard from people who are just going through different struggles, whether it be medical struggles at this time or struggles with their own family members, and the feedback that we got from that particular part was that it helped them to see that whatever that it is that they're going through, it's normal. In life, there are really wonderful moments of our lives, and then there are really times when we struggle and we have a hard time. And if you leave that whole piece out, then you're not really showing the fullness of a character. And so I think that once he started to understand that, and once he started to trust us and know that we weren't going to kind of scorn his name or scorn his character, we were just using it to enrich the story. It got a lot easier and it got fun. And then he started telling almost too much of the story. It's like, I think maybe we might want to press the brakes now. I think it's like too much information. But it got to be fun. And those are some of the most fun parts to read. And like I said, I mean, people identify with some of those characters that he met at the prison, for one reason or another. So it was a wonderful process, but it took a while to get everybody on board to what we were going to do. So great question, Donna. I appreciate that.
I think the prison chapters are my favorite chapters because once he was willing to talk about it, he was what he was at the Primadonna, he was at the prison. He was kind and he was funny and he cared about the individuals. So I really like that part of the book the best. And at first that wasn't in Maria's version because we didn't think he'd be comfortable.
Right. And my mom was worried about that too. Before the book came out, she said, well, now everybody's going to know the whole story. And I said, well, Mom, everybody already knows the whole story. You're just giving them more information about something that they've all wondered about. And I know that, Ruthie had a lot of questions too, which is why we put a lot of that stuff in the book.
I appreciate all the vulnerability that is expressed in the book. That couldn't have been easy.
Yeah.
You said that you had a hook, that you had to submit the hook line to the publishers. What was that?
So the hook was, I'm not going to get it 100% right, but this book, narrative nonfiction book, follows the rise of Joseph Costanzo Jr., who was the former owner of the Primadonna Restaurant, to success in a corrupt town outside of Pittsburgh, to his sharp fall, which ended with a stint in federal prison. So that kind of gives you the sizzle. All right, tell me a little bit more about that. But yeah, Casey, sorry, Donna, do you have more comment too? Because you're still unmuted, so.
I just wondered how your dad is doing now. Because this was that backstory about how it healed him to be involved in and have gratitude is like the next hook. People want to hear that, especially after the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Gratitude, rather than anger. Yep.
So that's an excellent story. And I will say that he is doing better than what he has been in the last 5 or maybe 10 years health-wise. I cannot tell you how many times we thought this book was not going to happen with him here. Real possibilities. And, doctors telling us, listen, there's no more hope. We don't know how, it's starting from, and that kidney story could actually be a story on its own. My mom was going to originally be my dad's kidney donor. And 1 week before the surgery, they called it off because the head surgeon at AGH, I guess, had been off whenever she was doing all the testing for years. And he came back from a sabbatical and they found that the anatomy of her kidney would just not fit with his body. So we found that out a week before the surgery. And they basically told us there are no other options than to get on the kidney list and wait. And you might want to think about kind of, if things don't go so well, you might want to plan in that direction. We just took no as that answer. And we did a summer kidney tour. So I found 8 hospitals within an 8-hour or less drive from Pittsburgh. And we visited every single hospital with my parents. And I made him, to make it fun for him, I made him a folder of pictures of everybody that was important to him. and we made it a kidney journey. It was a journey to life. And so we would visit all of these different hospitals, and it gave us a lot of hope. And we finally found a match at New York Presbyterian Hospital. So they were going to live here with me in New York, well, New Jersey, and then they were going to commute to New York City. And I renovated my entire downstairs by myself. It was kind of like Bob Vila, except not very good at being Bob Vila. So I was really only able to paint and just fix little odd things. But I got everything done, and they were supposed to come at the end of September of 2019. And he received a call from AGH for a deceased donor kidney on September the 11th, 2019. So I was expecting them to live with me, and I was expecting my mom to be his donor, and that didn't happen. Life took a different route. And then obviously with the failed kidney, there was a whole lot, with that too. And I think really this book, he wrote, because I made him write in my book, whenever we were at one of the book signings, and he wrote, "This book has resurrected me." And I think that that's the best way to describe it, because what has happened is not something that is at all logical. Normally if people are going down a negative medical path, a lot of times they kind of go like this. With my dad, it's been whoop, 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 whoop. And now with the book, I feel like it's been, whoo, this really, really nice path. So it just goes to show, and, what's the difference? Is there any sort of different medical interventions that are happening? No, certainly not. But what has happened is that he's got a new hope for life and a new thing to look forward to. So, what does that teach everybody, including me and my kids, is that you have to find light whenever you're sitting in a really dark and deep tunnel and it feels like things just can't get worse and nothing's going right for you and life is really hard, and these challenges come up and you're hearing really negative things about what a prognosis might be. If you have that hope within you and you have something that you're living toward and something that you're trying to do and that you're really passionate about, that defies all, what other people might say. If you have that will within you, I really do believe that, you can rise above. And I would say my dad is a really good example of that. So thank you for asking about that. And I think, Casey, you touched on the vulnerability, and that's something that was also really challenging, because all of this happened time frame wise, just so everybody understands. My dad got into business whenever I was 4 years old. So this story takes place from 1986 until the early 2000s, whenever I was 20 years old, whenever the federal government knocked on my door, and I was home alone at 20 years old, and I answered the door. And so that is the time frame for this particular story. That's when I lived. So the vulnerability for me and for my family obviously was the utmost, but this also happened during a time where I was growing and maturing and just kind of becoming an adult. And, I'm sure that you could all imagine the mental impact that might have on a young person. And that's another reason why it took 17 years to write the story, because I had to myself come to grips with how the heck this story even happened. I just had dinner with a friend for the holidays, and she's reading the book. She's not somebody that I grew up with, just somebody that I met here in New Jersey. And she said, "I'm reading this book and I know you and I've met your family and I know that your dad had this restaurant," but she said, "I'm having a really hard time believing that this was once your life." And I said, "Well, it was." It certainly was. Yeah, so it's hard to be vulnerable, but I think that the benefits to showing your vulnerability is that people can connect with the authentic version of who you are, not what you're trying to put out and be shielded in the world. But I'll let Ruthie add on to that too.
Well, I don't know if I'm adding to that, but I want to say something important, just so you can even imagine. Maria and I would, when I said we'd talk constantly, we mostly talked on the phone, and then we texted for short things like just sent that chapter or whatever. And we were talking one day, and she said, wonder how many calls and texts we had and emails. And I was at the computer. And I said, well, I can count the emails right now. So I went back 1 year, and I just kept pressing forward, forward, forward. There were 11,000 emails in a year. We weren't even feeling like that was our mode of communication. That's how close we were during this time. And I also want to say that Maria and I have never had a bad moment. I mean, I love family. I love my husband. I love my kids, but we've had some tension. But the two of us just set out respectfully, and we've been support for each other. And I feel so close to her, having this 6 years now since we started on this book. I feel as close to her as anybody, and it's just been a joy. And you can be that for somebody. You don't have to fight. You don't have to. I mean, we didn't always agree, but we used like the techniques. So you express yourself gently and respectfully. And it's just been, for me, a wonderful experience with another human being.
Oh, and I echo that. It's just been so fantastic. And we oftentimes get asked in interviews about our relationship and, teacher student, and kind of what it was like to work with one another. And really, from a very early time, Ruthie made me feel very comfortable. I think the hardest obstacle that I had to overcome is not calling her Mrs. Dines, which was her teacher name whenever I was in school. But how she beat that out of me is she said, Maria, I'm divorced and remarried. So when you call me Mrs. Dines, it's not like a positive thing because I'm married to somebody else. So if you could at least call me Ruthie, or if you have to call me Mrs., you could call me Mrs. Robbins, but I'm just no longer Mrs. Dines. And I thought, okay, well, I guess we're in a new era. I guess I could do this. But that was the hardest part for me, for sure. I know that we're getting close to time. I want to make sure that everybody is heard that would like to be heard. And then I do see there are a couple of questions in the chat too. So let's give everybody here a chance. If you haven't asked something, or if you have another question, please do ask.
I just wanted to know how the collaboration on the book came about between the two of you then.
Sure. So Ruthie was my AP English teacher, and also was one of the original customers at the restaurant, lived on the street that the restaurant actually sat on as well, on Dormont Street. We've had so many 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in our lives. I'm friends with her oldest son. I had her starting in 7th grade, and then multiple times in high school. She wrote my high school recommendation letters. And, I was working on this project. I kind of had gotten to a point where I couldn't go any further on it. And she had recently moved to Buffalo, and was working with a writing group, and she had edited some published works and started kind of taking some of the pieces of On the Rocks to that writing group. And that's how we started. It started more of a mentorship, and then we, very quickly went into a co-authorship, and she made a lot of really important choices about the book, how it was going to be narrated, the first person narrator voice of my father. And we just really collaborated really well together. We went back and forth on pages, and, talked about different things that we liked or didn't like, or things that we might want to try to bring in. And it's just been a beautiful process. I'll let Ruthie add to it too.
It has been. I was just about to say something and I lost it though. I don't know. But at first I was going to edit it, but then it was much more than an edit. So we did the back and forth. I would write, send it to her. She would write, send it to me. But there was something I was going to say in response to your question, and I kind of lost my thought. Can you remind me, is there something I'm not hitting that you answered, questioned? I don't know. But to me, the absolute biggest compliment, because I'm an English teacher, a critical reviewer said that we disrupted the genre of memoir biography, because two women writing in the man's voice. And I didn't realize how unusual that was. And that, to me, that was the best compliment you could give a teacher, that they disrupted a genre, you know. So that made me really happy.
I've only made it through chapter 14, and I can't wait to finish the rest of it.
Oh, great. I hope we didn't spoil anybody's chapters who hasn't finished, but I hope you'll enjoy it more knowing all the background.
Yeah.
How are the sales going? Is it going well in this area, southwestern Pennsylvania, or?
They are. I mean, we're told that our sales are exceptional for a first book, but we don't know. We don't know. It's our first time. Yeah. So, yeah, the Heinz History Center sold over 500 signed copies, and that was we were very proud that they put that on their website. I mean, it's the Smithsonian in Pittsburgh. So that too, like that was a real compliment that they would embrace the book. I teach middle school right now, though, so I have not promoted it in Buffalo because I teach in a Catholic school and we're very conservative. And I feel like if those kids open up and they see some of the language, I think, oh, that's my little old teacher wrote this. You know, I feel like they'd be shocked. I even said to my principal last spring, do you think I can come back? Because the parents, I mean, if you just show a PG movie, they're calling the school, you know, they're very protective in an unrealistic way, because these kids have phones and they've seen them. Some of them have seen more than we've ever seen as adults, right? But the parents are protective, and I was worried about it. So I really haven't done due diligence promoting in Buffalo. Just a little hesitant with the kids I teach. I guess I will, but right now, you know, we've been more in the Pittsburgh area and then trying to spread out as we can. We've been on some podcasts from New York City and other places in the United States. Maria was mentioned in LA Weekly, which is wonderful.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I get surprised because as a literature teacher, you're reading the greatest books of all time, you know, and you never feel like you can write. So when I see positive reviews, it makes me really happy. Yeah.
And I'll just add to the sales of just adding our websites too. I'll just add a little information about the sales. So I didn't really know much about book sales. On average, all of the books that are written, most of them don't sell more than 150 copies, believe it or not, even the traditionally published books, which I found kind of crazy. Our book has done very exceptionally well. And, you know, it's part of it, I think, is obviously it kind of has that hometown story to it, but part of it is just where people are right now. They want to read things that make them feel good and something that's about hope, and it's not divisive or people fighting. It's, you know, a very positive, uplifting story. So we're very, very lucky. We feel very, very blessed. I know we have a couple of questions really quickly in the chat to go through. I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I don't want to take anybody's personal time. Is everybody okay if we answer a couple more questions? Okay with time, or not so much? Yeah, or no?
We're good. If you don't mind taking a few more minutes of your time, Ruthie and Maria.
Sure, I definitely have a couple of minutes to spare. So Christine had asked about, go here. would you tell the charming stories that you heard at the Heinz History Center from the people who worked at the restaurant as well as their dependents? So as Ruthie had just described, we had our opening party 2 days before the book launched at the Heinz History Center, which was just so amazing. We had over 500 people show to that party, and it was a partnership between us and the Heinz History Center, and they sold the books, and we just had just such a nice night of, or afternoon of readings and a Q&A panel just like this one. And what was just so fantastic is the amount of people that used to work for my dad. Keep in mind, the restaurant closed 20 years ago. So the amount of people that came to the party, there's if you go onto somebody had asked about a Facebook page. So I put our handle, the @Joe Costanzo Primadonna on Facebook. Please do follow us. But the cover of that particular page is all of the past employees sitting with us. And that's a credit to my father as a restaurateur and an employer. He always found a way to uplift people. And, even in the beginning of the book, for those of you who have the book, the endorsement section, many of those endorsements were from people who formerly worked at the restaurant or from people whose parents had worked at the restaurant. And one just very endearing story, one like little factoid and then one like small endearing story, so we'll get to the rest of these questions too, is that we had a little reunion a few weeks ago, and the busboy in the book, Hoofty, has since then passed away. And his son came to the reunion, and they didn't have a funeral for Hoofty. And his son ended up coming to the reunion because he said, my dad's heart was so much in this restaurant and so much with the people that he worked with. I needed to have a way to find some closure on my dad's passing. So that's why I needed to come to this and to be a part of this. And the beautiful moments that happened around the table, sharing just those wonderful memories of Hoofty, and I won't ruin it for those of you who haven't, read the book or you're not too far into the book, but he was just such a fun, loving character in the book. And being able to relay that to his son was just amazing. And, I will say, and I'll kind of leave it at that till we move on to the next question, is that all of the young people that worked at the restaurant, a lot of them were from McKees Rocks. All of them have become incredibly successful at what it is that they're doing now, whether it's working in the banking industry, being a state cop. So it's really a testament to that hard work ethic that you get whenever you work in the hospitality industry. All right, so the next question is, would you please tell the story about how your dad was actually turned in by someone who was trying to protect himself and the fact that your dad wouldn't do that? So this is kind of a long story, and I don't really want to ruin it for the people who haven't read the book, but I'll just kind of leave this very shortly and say my dad's case started because somebody had mentioned his name in a federal grand jury investigation as a person of interest, so that particular person could kind of get their get out of jail free card. When the government had approached my dad, they asked him the same thing. Would he mention somebody else and then, have either completely get out of jail free card, and he wouldn't do it. So that's kind of what that is about. So loyalty is big for him and always has been. Lauren had said we should write a book about the process of getting this one published. Yes, we should. That is definitely a book within itself. She also asks, since the restaurant has closed, have you or your dad visited or driven by the location? If so, how did it make you feel? Yes. I actually drive by quite frequently. I have to, whenever I come to Pittsburgh, and I come a lot because I have lots of events in Pittsburgh, which before we get off, I'll tell you about some of the ones that are upcoming because they're kind of cool. So I always drive to McKees Rocks. It's almost, my husband calls me the homing pigeon. I have to always start from McKees Rocks and then I can go other places in Pittsburgh, but I can't have to originate in McKees Rocks. So I make my stop at Mancini's Bread and then always drive by Broadway and Dormont. Now that location is I mean, I guess you would call it a convenience store, kind of a very shady bodega. There's been some not so great activity there within the last few months. I think there was a shooting there during the day. So it certainly doesn't make me feel good to see what the location has become. It's very bizarre though, because for the longest time, and I'm not sure, I haven't paid attention, but for the longest time, the awning was still on the building. So it was a maroon awning with my dad's initial J on it. And they just never took it down. So it looked very chintzy. So it's sad. It brings, it's almost easier for it not to be a restaurant though, in a weird way. It's easier for it to be something totally different. So I don't associate that with the restaurant anymore. Ruthie, what about you? What do you think when you drive past?
I pass it all the time. Even though I live in Buffalo, sometimes I'm in Pittsburgh 3 weekends. Most of the summer I was in Pittsburgh. And I always think, I hope it would be easy to buy out and then film the story in there. That's what I always think. But here's just this little trivia. Maybe none of you knows this story, but I'm in Buffalo now, and you can't help but love the Buffalo Bills because they're of good character and they try hard. Josh Allen's he's like a Sid Crosby of Buffalo. So Damar Hamlin almost died last year. He had a heart attack and he came very near death. And now he's very famous for that. His mother's daycare is in the building exactly behind the Primadonna. The backs of the two buildings face each other. So here in Buffalo, I say, see that building? Damar's mother's daycare is right behind there. That's my little claim to fame in Buffalo. And so I've dropped off a book to her. I've dropped off magazines, but she always sends someone else downstairs. I haven't met her yet, but that's the playground where I played too. So it's just to think of these big things and stories happening on the little street where I grew up. It's exciting. It's really fun.
We have another question from Donna Herbert, and she said, let us know how to reach you to give feedback on the book after we read it and perhaps help you get the word out about this story besides giving a review on Amazon, perhaps a Facebook group. So I did type in the Facebook and Instagram page is at Joe Costanzo Primadonna if you search it. And you could also find the information on either of our websites, which Maria C. Palmer and .com and also RuthieRobbins.com too. If you're part of Goodreads, you could certainly do a review on Goodreads, really anywhere. Target has reviews, Barnes and Noble. Just telling people about the book. If you're part of, neighborhood pages, I know here I live in a town called Ringwood. We have a Ringwood Moms and Dads page, but any, local pages that you might be a part of or affiliated with, certainly mentioning the book or just talking about it. We are very open to doing other things. I met Christine at a talk just like this, and now I'm here. So, if one of you has a group, a book club separately that's not affiliated with, Parkinson's Foundation, or maybe it is affiliated with Parkinson's Foundation, it doesn't matter either way. We'd certainly be willing to come and talk at any groups. We both come to Pittsburgh often. We have lots of events. I want to just tell you what's coming up in January for us on January 20th, and I can get this information to Casey and Lauren. We're going to be doing a cook and book in Pittsburgh from 11 to 1, I think it is, or maybe 11 to 2. It's going to be, we're cooking homemade ricotta gnocchi and then sitting down over lunch and going to do a book discussion. I did one of these in New Jersey, and it was so much fun, so many laughs. We had such a good time. I actually had to tell people that I had to leave because I had to go to sleep and I had to let the babysitter go home. We ended up being there forever, just talking and chatting. So it's a really great holiday gift. If you would like to come, or you treat yourself, or you treat other people that you love, but there's an option just for cooking, and then there's an option with the books, obviously, too. So definitely check that out. Like I said, my mom will be at the McKees Rocks Historical Society on January 16th. So if you want to hear Donna's story, definitely stop by. And they also stream. So if you can get onto Zoom or get onto Facebook, you can look at the McKees Rocks Historical Society, and you can view that as well.
I haven't looked at my website for about 2 months because I haven't been well, but if anybody is on Facebook, I would love if you would friend me and say we were on tonight, and be friends on Facebook. I'd love to keep in touch with you. And if we can help with your journey in any way, please reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ruthie put together some really awesome book discussion questions, which you could find on our websites too. So, feel free to pull them out if you want to think a little deeply about the book. And I know we've kept you way over time, so I'll let Lauren and or Casey close us out tonight.
Well, thank you so much. This was so informative and fun, and it really gives you a history of Pittsburgh too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was
Thank you.
great.
Thank you all for spending your time with us.
Yes, thank you both. We look forward to staying in touch, and yes, we'll let all of you know about these upcoming events that Maria had mentioned.
Yes, let us know how we can continue to support you.
For sure. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everybody. Well, happy holidays
Good gifts
to
for the
everybody.
holidays
Thanks
too.
for spending this time with us.
And these are great gifts for the holidays. Bye.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Thank you.